What is up, people, and welcome back to the Story Strengthcast with myself, Shane Story. Hope we're all having a fantastic week. We're back with the episodes. Today it's just going to be a solo podcast, just with myself, as we have some guests that I actually recorded with this week that will be coming up in the next few weeks. So I'm looking forward to sharing them with you. But it's been a month since I did my last powerlifting competition. It's been a month since I have started my bodybuilding journey, and it's been a month since I have started my fat loss phase. So I thought this actually be a really good time to kind of discuss how the last 4 weeks have went with that, the changes that have been made to my diet, to my training, to my cardio, all these different things, because it is summer, right? And there is a lot of people out there who are going on their own fat loss journeys right now. And whether you are somebody who is just doing the first one, or somebody who is, this is maybe your second, your third, whatever, I'm going to share some perspective that I have gained, I guess, from not only coaching hundreds of people, but like also from having done many successful diet phases myself. And we're not going to necessarily go into, how to set up a calorie deficit. We're not going to go over like how to set up your macros. I'm not even really going to be talking too much about like the nutritional targets, cardio targets, like, training methodologies during a diet phase. I'm actually going to be talking more so about the practical side of things, right? Because I think it's very, very easy for you to go online and find out how to set up a fat loss plan, right? Like, all you need to do is literally, and like, this is not putting myself out of a job at all, because, again, if coaches like myself were going to become obsolete with the introduction of things like ChatGPT, people would be dropping off like flies. But ChatGPT exists there. You could go onto it right now and say, hey, I am X body weight, I'm X height, I have X goal, I want to drop X amount of body fat by this date. Tell me exactly what type of calories and macros to do, and also write me a meal plan. Like, you can literally do that. However, one of the kind of things that a robot will never have is context and perspective and experience, having done it themselves. And, I've been training, as mentioned many times, I've been training since 15. I've done so many diet phases. I've done, a natural bodybuilding prep, which is as tough a diet as you're going to get, right? So in my prep in 2022, I went from 94 kilos down to my lowest body weight was like 76 kilos. So that's 17 kilos of fat loss. And I got as lean as, you realistically can get, striated every single muscle that there is to striate. My arse was not inside out, thankfully, but my ass had striations from the outside to the inside. That's a graphic picture for you there. But I've gotten as lean as one potentially can, and a lot of the other diet phases I've gotten relatively like quite lean, veins in abs type lean. And I think, having pushed myself to those points, it really does help me to understand where people struggle. It helps me understand, what it feels like to kind of get to those levels of leanness, and get to like levels of leanness that are not as extreme, of course, right? Because, I think most people are never really going to want to get to that point. Like, but most people would never want to get to the point of having like veins in their stomach type abs. So most people would just want to be able to see maybe some type of ab outline, some type of definition in their arms, their legs, or whatever, or even just to get rid of the love handles. And I've been there, done that, and I've coached hundreds of people to do the exact same. So for the next couple of months, really until August, I am going to be dieting. So it's gonna be a lengthy out process. So pretty much start in April, finish in August. That's a decently long fat loss phase. It is going to come up to about 20 weeks, and the kind of aim really is to get my body weight to within 10% of my stage weight from 2022. Now, I would hope that in the last few years of all the training I've been doing, I've gained a little bit of muscle so that maybe that stage weight is a little bit elevated. Having trained for so long and being as advanced as I am, I'm not really expecting a huge amount. Like, to be honest, if I gained like 2 kilos of muscle, like pure muscle, I would be absolutely flabbergasted. I'd be fucking over the moon. Because 2 kilos of muscle mass, it doesn't sound like a lot, especially when you're like, oh, well, you trained for 3 years and you went from Again, my kind of stage weight was 78 kilos, 76 being like, very, very flat, kind of low body weight at prep with essentially no muscle glycogen and very bleh, low water stores in my body and fuck all gut matter. And then all the way up to 101 kilos. And you'd be like, so you're telling me you gained like fucking over 20 kilos of body weight, and you think after 3 years that you may have only gained 2 kilos of muscle. And this is just the reality of, when you are advanced, again, training for 15 years and you're kind of at the kind of probably in the, I'm probably in, I would say I've got about 10% maybe left in terms of like strength potential, and maybe something in that range. I'm maybe being optimistic here with the likes of my muscle mass potential too. I think I'm maybe at 90% capacity. So the further you get closer to your genetic ceiling, the harder those gains get are to come by. So if you gained 2 kilos of muscle in that time frame, think about having 2 kilos of chicken breasts and just putting them onto your body. It's pretty fucking noticeable, So again, if that was at the top end, I'd be absolutely over the moon. I'd be delighted with 1 kilo, right? So we'll see what happens across these next couple of months. But yeah, I started this diet phase at about 101 kilos, and started that pretty much the Monday after my last competition. There was no like post competition or pre diet like last chance meal, like death row meal, whereas like ordering pizza and Chinese and stuff like that. To be honest, the Sunday before I start my fat loss phase, I was violently hungover, so I actually didn't eat much at all. I think I prepped a few meals, and that was pretty much the height of it. I prepped it like just some normal meals for whatever I could stomach with my kind of hungover appetite levels, and then just stuck in. And I think like this kind of speaks to the fact that like I was ready to diet, and I think starting off with one of our kind of fat loss essentials here that I'm going to go through as I'm kind of talking through my process. The being ready aspect is so important. Like, you have to want to diet. Like, you should be sick and tired of being fat and out of shape, or just like sick and tired of eating excessive amounts of food as you're like maybe coming off the end of a gaining phase. You should be really motivated. You should really, really want it. The fact that like when you get like a sent a diet plan off a coach, or you're starting up one yourself, you should be ready to get stuck in, and you should be excited for that change. And I very much was. Like, I was really excited for a change of pace. I was sick and tired of eating well over 4,000 calories of food per day. I was eating about 4,500 calories. Some days I was getting closer to 5,000 calories. I had a very, very kind of variable intake with my nutrition. And when you're eating that much food and you're so heavy, and then it's getting really hot in places like Marbella, like it's just not a nice feeling. And one thing that like people, if without getting up to these like high levels of food intake, what a lot of people don't realize is when you're eating that much food, like if you miss a meal, you're kind of fucked for the day, right? You're on the back foot straight away. And like when you're dieting, like if you get to the end of the day and you're dieting and you have like 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 calories left to eat, that seems like heaven, because your appetite is so high and you're like you're able to put that amount of food down because you haven't been eating much in total. However, if you get to that point at the end of a gaining phase where you've missed a meal and now you have to have essentially 2 meals worth of calories in one, that is pain. Like that's me sitting at the dinner table for 45 to 50 minutes, chugging water towards those last few bites to just try to get it down, and lying on the couch absolutely stuffed. I was tired of that feeling, and then I was also just tired of just being a little bit softer, right? Like most people, I do appreciate. I like how I look. I like looking good, right? I like when I feel like I have a jawline. I like when I have a little bit more kind of visible ab definition. I like when I can see like some vascularity in my arms, and I also like when t-shirts that are meant to be oversized are oversized, and I don't like when the pants in my jeans are a lot harder to close, and especially like I've got a couple of weddings this summer, and I'm getting married myself next summer, so actually being able to fit into some of my suits, right? Because this one thing about suits and just like tailored clothing in general. It's not made for you going through these gaining cycles and cutting cycles, right? You buy a shirt and it does not stretch. You buy suit pants and most of the time they don't stretch. Not stretchy material, so it's also financial cost there too in regards to being a bit larger. So I was really ready to just get stuck into this, and of course I'm obviously very, very motivated by the bodybuilding goal too. However, one thing I actually find that happens, it happens semi frequently, is I'll be working with a client and they be like, they get to the point where they feel like they want to diet, but like deep down they don't really. And the way you can kind of tell this is the actual diet kind of comes into the conversation from like a reaction, right? It's like a case of like they caught themselves in the mirror and they didn't look great, and it's just that one variable, right? It's that one thing. Okay. And I kind of know like a couple of different things here, right? I know like the kind of food intake, like getting really, really tough to get down. Obviously, some like preference over my body composition, and obviously kind of bodybuilding goals does have a timeline, and then also like fitting into wedding suits, that kind of thing, right? However, if it was a case where I was just like kind of reactively deciding to kind of diet because my preference for my body composition right now is not where I wanted to be, and that was triggered by me catching myself in the mirror, or fitting into a pair of jeans or something like that. I would need more confirmation that I need to diet than just that one thing. I need to have more, okay? Because so when these things happen for a lot of time for a lot of people, unless people have a little bit more kind of like tougher body image issues, is they can be things that are fleeting, right? Like that kind of feeling of discomfort will come and pass, and as soon as you kind of tap into or remind yourself all the benefits of maybe being a little bit heavier in terms of body weight, higher in body fat, like the performance benefits it gives you, the ability to eat more calories and be more flexible at social occasions, the ability to have higher energy potentially during the day, the ability to recover better between your training sessions, uh, just the feeling of having less restriction overall. Like when you kind of remember these benefits, you're like, okay, I can kind of brush off that little bit discomfort. You're allowed to have a preference for your body, but sometimes that preference can just be kind of put aside relative to other priorities that you have. If there's no point being thick skin lean and having zero energy, and then at the same time trying to build your business, and the business is failing because you simply can't put any energy into the business because you're kind of stuck in this body composition goal, which really doesn't have any bearing on the business growing, or or nor does anybody else really care about it, right? So there's these things here. And it's some conversations that I've actually had with some clients in the last couple of weeks, right? So like at the start of this month, I actually I talked the client into finishing up coaching with me, right? And you're really like, what? Why on earth would you do that, right? So this client, he started up with me initially for nutrition coaching. He was working with a coach at the time. Finished up with his training coach, and then he signed up with me for training and nutrition coaching. Right now, after like his main kind of goal was to improve body composition, get leaner, and it had a number of different things happen, personal stuff pop up, and there was just like a general like erraticness, you could say, with his diet, and we just weren't really kind of moving towards the kind of goal that you set out. We weren't really kind of doing the things that we'd agreed upon. And for week to week, he was just noting in his areas you struggle with in the check-in. Oh, I need to sort that out. I'm not giving enough effort here, and things of that nature, right? And I essentially kind of just sent a message, or like replied to his check-in, and I said, I didn't say outright, you're fired. Stop. I'm not coaching you. I more so kind of prompted him with some questions, right? So in regards to the questions I asked him, right? So I asked him, why is improving his body composition important to him right now? Like, what is the urgency in improving body composition right now? And why is improving his diet important to him? Okay. The next thing I kind of asked him was, what would be a reason for you to change right now? What would be a pro of changing? What would be a downside of changing? And then what would be a pro of staying the same and not really changing anything right now at all? And what would be a con of that? Okay. Now, I think this is a useful kind of like task or series of questions to ask yourself anytime you're kind of met with this, like you started a goal and you just don't really seem to be actioning things that are related to the goal, following through on it and succeeding. Okay. Because a lot of people don't go through the effort of actually kind of questioning their motivations behind a goal. And sometimes the reasons that you want to actually kind of work towards a goal, they're superficial at best. And as a result of things being superficial at best is quite often when you meet the first point of resistance, it is going to be the first thing that drops off and you disregard. And unfortunately, when you're looking to lose body fat, there's just so much that can get in the way of that goal, right? Especially because, like, you know, if you, for example, have if you have a more variable lifestyle, you're always on the road, or you don't have a home with great cooking facilities, or even if food is a coping mechanism for you when you are stressed or when times get busy, or maybe your nutritional literacy is just not great, and when you go out and about, maybe your ability to kind of guesstimate portion sizes, guesstimate kind of calorie intake is just not quite where it could be for you to succeed, right? Now, all of those things, they take just a little bit of time to actually kind of dial in too. It's probably better off to kind of do it outside of the diet phase, because that is a side of nutrition which I think stands to a lot of people when they do come into a diet phase, because then they're very much prepared for it. But again, if you go through these lists of questions and you realize that, you know what, improving body composition and getting leaner right now, doing a fat loss phase, it is low down on my list of priorities. It is so low down on the list of my priorities that it is going to be something that I'm going to do as an afterthought, or, you know, when I get time, or I'm going to focus on it once I clear my plate. It is not a time to lose body fat, right? And that is okay. Where it doesn't matter what you have coming up. It doesn't matter, like, you know, what event you have to be ready for, what holiday you have to be ready for. If it's not a good time because you don't have everything else set around your life, that's gonna set you up for success coming into the fat loss phase. And as a result, you have like you do have a limited amount of kind of motivation or willpower that you can dictate towards any one task, and only so much energy you can dictate to any given amount of tasks per day. Then you have to kind of just take the L on that one, and you can always come back to it when you're in a better place. And again, I think this is a very, very important kind of step for most people to take when it does come to deciding, is it time for me to lose body fat right now, you know? And like, even those motivations and it being ready, like, that comes down with, like, there's a lot of changes that may need to take place during the fat loss phase. Like, if you're a smaller individual, you might have to do a lot of cardio, because cleaving away a lot of the calories that you have, your calories may already be quite low. And if you're to do absolutely zero cardio, and you're already on low calories to begin with from a maintenance perspective, well, then you could be like, you might not be terribly far away from having a triple digit calorie intake per day. And well, what does cardio cost? Cardio costs time. Like, you know, cardio, like, you have to get to the gym, and you have to get back from the gym, and then you have to do the actual thing in the gym. And then there is also potentially like a monetary cost there too. Maybe you're spending a bit more petrol because you have to make an extra trip to the gym a couple of times a week. You could decide to buy some cardio equipment for home, for sure. That's definitely an option, and, you know, something I've done. You know, when I was living abroad, like, well, I'm living abroad right now, but when I was living in Canada, I was living in Spain the last time, we did invest in an exercise bike. We invested in a cross trainer. Yeah, cross trainer is probably a bit more of the extravagant type of cardio equipment to get. But, you know, that was Emma's decision, not mine. But, like, you know, that's something you have to consider. So I was like, are you willing to do that? like, are you willing to, start doing cardio and kind of have that extra time, kind of take up some space in your schedule? That does mean having less time for other things. Are you ready to maybe make some pretty big changes to your diet to make it easier to stick to? Like, for example, are you ready to start, eating more fruits and vegetables? Are you ready to start decreasing, ultra processed convenient foods that you have in your diet? Are you ready to decrease the amount of alcohol you drink per week? Are you ready to, maybe reduce the amount of takeaways that you get per month? These are things that, like, you have to consider when it does come to your motivations, because the longer your list of things you won't do, right? The longer the list the things you won't do, the less options you have really to get the result, and the harder ultimately ends up being. Like, the most challenging kind of coaching like kind of situations I find myself in is when somebody has a laundry list of things they are just unwilling to do, or things that they can't do from a, like, even scheduling perspective. Like, it makes things more challenging, and it does mean then up front for me, I need to set expectations. I need to say, hey, this is everything that we're working with. This is things that we can't work with. Whether that's something that the person is self-imposed or just unwilling to change on, or something that is imposed on them, being scheduling. Well, then it's like, okay, well, this process here of you getting to the place where you want to be with body composition is going to take a lot longer than you probably think. And with that, then it's like, okay, well, how strong is your motivation? For example, I've got the next 3 months to kind of get or the next couple of months till August to get in the shape I want to be in. Okay, that's fine. That's a fine timeline for me. Like, fucking 19 weeks of dieting. That's piss. I've done 40. I've done 40. so 90 weeks of dieting is fine. And again, my life is set up around this. Again, my life is as cushy as it possibly can to achieve this goal. But for somebody who's maybe less experienced, and for somebody who's less dietary acumen, as you could say, they may need to go longer. And as a result, then that motivation, that's going to be the motivations are going to be really, really important. So going through again those kind of questions on whether you're ready for it, what are the reasons for change, what is good about changing, what's not good about changing, what's good about staying the same, what's not good about staying the same. All these different things. Get your priorities straight, and again, if you're ready, you will be excited to do it, and you'll be excited every single day, every single week. Well, not every single day, but like, you'll be excited like 90% of the time, rather than, like, kind of having a distaste for the actual process itself. So I kind of went through, like, my reasons about being ready for it. So I think one thing I also wanted to discuss here is, like, how my diet is actually set up. So my diet right now is a mixture of lower carb days and higher carb days. So I have essentially a split calorie approach. Now, this is something I'll use from time to time with my own clients, and there's a couple of reasons why you can do this. So you could do this from a theoretical performance perspective, and you might hear of this called, like, carb cycling, where somebody essentially on a training day is going to have higher carbohydrates, on a non-training day they'll have lower carbohydrates, right? And sometimes, depending on what a coach will decide, some days that lower carbohydrate day could also just be a lower calorie day in general, because some people say, okay, well, you're not training on that day, so you don't need as much calories on that day, and as a result, your calories are just lower. Or some coaches will try to keep the calories relatively similar, but they might just increase fats. Okay, now you might be like, okay, well, why would you do one, or why would you do the other? Okay, so if you have, like, some of those days which are more kind of lower calorie days, okay, and then the higher calorie days, well, you could say, okay, well, yeah, again, you're not training on that day, so you don't require as much energy, and this is a good way for us to kind of make up an extra little bit of deficit. So you're still in a deficit on high calorie days, but you're in a greater deficit on the non-training days. So this allows you to essentially, especially when your calories are quite low, this essentially allows you to have a better kind of weekly deficit versus having every single day the exact same and just taking an even chunk off every single day. Because again, there could be some benefit to recovery on that training day, or just having those extra carbohydrates on that training day to allow you about recover better from the session, or perform better in the session. Now, from the perspective of having the kind of fat increase and having the calories pretty much equal, but having a high carb, low fat, and then low carb, high fat kind of day. The kind of, I guess, kind of way you can kind of come about this is that on the lower, Jesus Christ, I get so confused going through low, high. But if you're having the low carb, high fat day and you're not training on that day, well, now we're getting some more fats, or bringing the fats up to kind of make up the calorie intake, right? Now on this day, because you're not training, you're resting more, potentially you could be burning more fat for fuel, like in theory, as you are resting more. Or you could also look at it from the satiety point of view. So fat is going to be a lot more filling than carbohydrates. Even though carbohydrates are a lot more voluminous, fats are more satiating than carbohydrates, right? Especially because they're not having any kind of like major kind of spikes with insulin. So insulin is something that we've talked about in previous podcasts before. Insulin is not the devil, but when the more kind of insulin spikes that you can have throughout the day, and the more kind of the more insulin spikes you have throughout the day, some people will find, especially if they are having like their blood sugar rise, insulin's acting to essentially kind of store the sugar that's coming from the food into the actual kind of muscle cells, for example, into liver cells or whatever. Some people can find that they get a little bit more hungry when they're not training or have higher carbohydrates because of these kind of spikes. Whereas having a higher fat intake, with that could, number one, kind of level off, but also again, because fat is slower digesting and more satiating, then people can feel a little bit more kind of satiated on this day, and as a result, it can be relatively effective depending on where you're getting your fat sources from, right? So this is kind of how I have mine set up at the moment, right? So essentially my calories are relatively equivalent most days, but I have a high carb, low fat, and then low carb, high fat. Sorry, high carb, low fat, low carb, high fat. my god. So essentially that's how I have it set up. And to be honest, there isn't so I've got 5 of those high carb days and 2 low carb days. Okay, and those low carb days, as you probably have guessed, they are on my rest days. So I've got 2 rest days per week and training 5 days per week. I'm running essentially just a bodybuilding split. I've got no squat, no bench or deadlift on my program, which is weird because they've been movements I've been doing for the last 5 years pretty much consistently. So, I have a little bit of I feel a little bit weird about letting them go because, I got to a pretty good level at them, except for bench press. So I don't miss bench press at all, but I definitely miss squatting and deadlifting. I am doing one single per week. That's off program, and that's only because I am actually teaching a deadlift seminar at the end of next month for one of my friends, Ross McInley. So I want to keep myself somewhat sharp for that, or else I'll come teaching the deadlift seminar and I'll be asking the lads who are there if they'll show me how to deadlift. So I just have that in once per week. But other than that, that's the extent of the powerlifting that I have in my program right now. Otherwise, it's all body composition focus, all bodybuilding focus. So more so focus on muscle groups versus movements, and running a push-pull legs, upper lower training split. Again, pretty much mostly machine based. There's a bit of free weights in there too, for good measure. But again, the kind of main aim of this and the main setup of my program, if you want to follow what like exercise I'm doing and stuff like that, just if you could be watching this on YouTube, but if you're not, go over to my YouTube, Shane Story. We're at sstory94, and I'm in the process of vlogging this evolution, me coming out my powerlifter cocoon and blossoming as a bodybuilder butterfly. But if you want to see what exercise I'm doing and how I'm going to go about my training, you can go over that, because I'm not going to explain every single day here. But essentially, the reason a lot of my work is going to be through machines is because I'm just going through this diet phase, and from a continuation point of view of the program across the diet phase, running exercises which are more externally stabilized, so using more machines versus using a lot of free weights, it can be a little bit easier to keep the program consistent then, right? So I don't imagine there'll be much changes to my training program throughout this process, and that's an important point, right? Like when you're going through a diet phase, you kind of want to just keep your training as same as same as when you're gaining to a degree, right? Assuming you're kind of following this kind of same training paradigm, right? Like going from powerlifting to bodybuilding that's only because my goal of training has changed. But if I was going for a bodybuilding in a gain phase to bodybuilding in a diet phase, I program probably have stayed relatively the same, right? And this is just to ensure that there is retention of numbers. So if you were going to the gym and you're trying to like progressively train the way you should be anyway, regardless of gaining or dieting or whatever, it's easier to standardize movement pattern. It's easier to standardize progression if you're using something that's an externally stabilized machine, right? Because the path of motion on most machines is going to be the exact same week to week, okay? Relative to if you're doing a deadlift, right? Or you're doing a squat or you're doing a bench, right? Your leverages can change, and your like things like your brace can change, can feel different. You know, if you consider somebody who's squatting, right, and you have quite a bit of body fat, your upper back is going to be a really good padding surface there for that bar. And as you get leaner and leaner and leaner, like I did during my contest prep when I was in my bodybuilding season, I kept the barbell squatting for a long time. You know, that bar started to feel very bad in my back. Like it started to feel really sore, and I had some pretty bad like scabs on my upper back from where the bar was sitting. And that was like actually like still using a t-shirt. And then even for the example of bench press. Bench press is one that's so very, very notorious for having a lot of kind of aspects change as you get leaner, right? So you lose body fat off your back, you lose body fat off your chest, off your glutes. All of this is kind of is starting to decrease in arch. It's also starting to decrease stability on the bench. Whereas, you know, if I'm doing something like and then as well, of course, with all those kind of factors there, that kind of changes the movement pattern as well, right? Because like, you know, things like rib cage elevation, everything is going to be starting to change due to like the arch changing and everything, right? However, and then as well, I actually have to stabilize the bar myself. Whereas now, if I'm doing something that is like, you know, machine press, I'm doing you know, versus doing a pull-up, I'm doing like a single arm pull down or something like that. There is less movement variability versus just the joint that I am looking to use, right? The very, very important concept for hypertrophy training is what joint is moving and what joint is not moving, okay? We want the joint that is attached to the muscle that we're trying to train. We want that thing to be the main thing that's moving. Anything else, we want to try to stabilize and quiet, right? Because we're trying to train that muscle group, right? And that's a big distinction between bodybuilding and like strength training or powerlifting, right? It's muscle specific. So that's a really important aspect there. And again, that's where all these externalized stabilized movement patterns come in. It is essentially reducing energy expenditure, removing variables in regards to different muscle groups trained relative to the ones that you do want to train, and it just makes then that training a lot more accurate. But not only that, then because of all these factors, you're also reducing some elements of fatigue, right? So my training program now, I'm doing more volume in a single training session, right? So doing more sets, definitely more sets per muscle group. I'm doing more exercises overall. However, my sessions are actually still around the same time as they were when I was doing powerlifting. And one of the reasons for this being is like when doing powerlifting, my training sessions were very long because number one, the sets themselves, like, you know, working up to, you know, 200 plus on the squat, you know, first of all, the warm-ups take time to do, and then there's obviously the bit of nervous anticipation before you get underneath the bar. Then there's the kind of trying to not catch your breath, but like there's the like after a set where you're like, fuck's sake, I have to do back downs now, or fuck's sake, I have to do that again, or fuck's sake, I have to go heavier. There's a lot of that, and like just the time it could take for me to get through a squat on a powerlifting day could be 45 minutes to an hour. When it's doing my peak, it was up to 2 hours just getting through my wrap squats. Whereas now doing bodybuilding training, because of the way that my actual program is actually set up, like I get through the entirety of my day in probably less than 2 hours, right? And again, that's with more volume, more exercise selection added in there. So, and then as well, it's also because I'm getting fatigued, right? Like you get fatigued within the session, right? You're going to get tired during the session. But one of the kind of things I've definitely taken away from the last few weeks training is it's not as like I need to sit on the floor after that exercise type difficult, you know. For some exercises, slightly, but I don't feel like when I come home that I'm absolutely cabbage. Like there's some sessions I would have done for powerlifting that I wouldn't be able to have check-in scheduled after. You know, I'd need to come home and just be doing nothing because I'd just be so fucked. be so systemically taxed. Whereas doing this bodybuilding training, I'm just like, my muscle feels sore. My joint feels maybe a little bit stiff after that session, but I feel good otherwise. I feel like my brain is still working. Whereas, doing powerlifting wasn't really the case. So, that's like some of the kind of big differences that I've seen in the training so far. And of course, I'm starting to see some body composition change too. As a result of just like training some muscle groups that I wasn't really hitting with much volume. So again, for a lot of training stuff, you go onto my YouTube and watch that, because I go into more of the training stuff there, okay? Now, some other stuff that I am doing too, right? So step count is a big one that I'm looking at, and it's something that I program pretty diligently for my clients too. It's just like ensuring they have a step count if they're looking to lose some body fat. And one of the reasons for it being is, well, we can like manage the energy inside of the equation with the calories, and that's probably the most useful thing for us to manage realistically. However, getting a good idea as to what the energy outside of the equation is important, right? So I assume and I hope that when I give a client a training program that is made with their own agreed upon kind of decision, that they're going to be training 3 days per week, 4 days per week, 5 days per week, whatever it is, that they're going to train that many times per week. They're going to do the exercises that are on the program. They're going to do the sets that are on the program, right? That is assumed to be, being done, okay? So that side of the energy out equation, I don't think about, and I'm not even thinking about their training as a means to burn calories at all. But that does make up a significant portion of their energy out. However, what makes up an even more significant portion is just how you move for the rest of the day, right? So that's where steps come in. And usually I'll kind of give people a step goal. So it can range very much, but it's really just dependent on what that person is starting at, and then kind of giving them maybe 20% bump up from where they are to a target to kind of get them moving more, right? Now, this is just a very easy way to increase energy expenditure, which doesn't really create as much of a time investment as cardio. You can walk around your house. You can literally walk around the kitchen table if you're stuck. You can just go outside and walk up and down the road. You can find a good loop around your area. It doesn't. You could get off a bus stop earlier on the way home from work. You could park further away from the shopping center or from the shops. Pick the furthest parking place from your workplace. Whatever it may be, these are things that I will recommend people, my clients do. They're things I'll do myself. Like anytime I go to Tesco in my local area, I will park first. Like I still do this, like just subconsciously, because I did this for so long with for the first summer I implemented this, that I park in like the most not unfortunate, the most yeah, I got just the furthest parking space away from the actual entrance. And even when it's gaining, I'm like, why am I still parking here? It's become muscle memory now. But these are very, very simple ways to just like increase your overall step count without you really noticing. Like one thing that really pisses me off, I'm just be a mini rant here. I fucking hate when you're, I don't know, you're going somewhere, you're going to a shopping center or you're going to shops or something like that, and there are these people who they are like they're waiting at the very, very front parking space to the place they're going into, right? They're trying to get to the closest one to the shop. Like, okay, fair enough. If you're disabled or you are injured or something like that, like fair enough, or you're elderly or whatever. But if you can't find the parking place that is right beside the thing you're going to, it's okay to park a little bit further away. And you know what? This is a hack I use, like not for fat loss, but anytime I go anywhere and parking is an issue, I don't even bother going to the parking places that are closer to where I'm going to. Like if there's a car park, I'll go to the first one away, because you know what? There's always spaces there, and you know what? God gave me 2 legs, and I know how to fucking use them. That's just pet peeve of mine. Like even when I go to shopping centers, like I'm not like circling the ground floor or level 1 like a fucking chump waiting for people to reverse out. I'm going up to the very, very top level where nobody goes, and I'm gonna get into the shopping center quicker than the people who are waiting on the ground floor at level 1 for the most convenient parking place. And realistically, it's not as convenient because you're definitely not saving any time. Anyway, that's a bit of a rant. But yeah, these are just some very simple ways to accumulate some easy steps. Now, my step target is 10,000 on rest day. Oh, sorry, 10,000 on training days and 12,500 on non-training days. Now, I'm being a very bold athlete because I am doing more than that, right? I'm doing probably closer to 15,000 a day. And the reason that is the case is just because I have the dog, I've got little baby Samson and he requires walking. And I like walking him because it's an opportunity for him to meet some friends, meet some other dogs, and to spend more time around other people too. So, and then as well, it's just the weather's always nice here in Marbella, so I'm like, I want to spend more time outside than do inside. So my step count is a bit more elevated. So the way I break it up is I will do one longer walk in the morning. So I'll typically wake up in the morning, kind of do my bits and bobs, bit of work, and then I will go for about 45 minutes to an hour walk. It could come up to an hour. Realistically, that walk should take me 35 minutes, but because of Samson now, it takes me about an hour because every time he sees a dog, he has to lie down. For whatever reason, he has to lie down. Every single dog. He has to lie down, and there's no way to get him up other than literally picking him up and carrying him, which I actually have done a few times when I was just like I've been in a rush or something. So, yeah, first walk in the morning before breakfast. Don't do any specific reason before breakfast other than it's a nice break up from work. I get to go outside, get a bit of fresh air, eat, get back to work, and then I will go for another one in the evening time just before dinner. Again, I don't know, maybe I do it subconsciously because my appetite's better, but I definitely know I actually also do it before dinner because after dinner I just like sit down on the couch and watch something on TV. So that's essentially how I have my steps broke up. And I recommend a lot of my clients kind of break up their steps kind of in a similar kind of fashion, not in the exact same fashion, but like, have a strategy to it. Have a strategy to getting your steps in, right? Like, one kind of point that I have written in here as like an essential for fat loss is like you need to plan ahead, right? Like whether that's you putting your training in, put your cardio in, putting your steps in, planning out your diet for the day. Like you need to have a plan, right? And like ultimately, this is one of the reasons why you can go on to my ChatGPT and put in what calories do I need, but coming up with a strategy for your lifestyle, like that's going to be very much dependent on you. Like for some people, they won't be able to afford that long of a walk in the morning. They won't be able to afford that long of a walk in the evening time. Maybe you're a female and you feel unsafe going out in the evening time because maybe it's getting dark or the area you're in is just not a safe area, or whatever it may be. Maybe you live in an area where there's no footpaths. It's not a walkable area. These are all things that you need to factor in. However, you can kind of know that in advance. Like if you're a woman and you don't feel safe in your area, you probably fucking know you're a woman right now, right? If there's no footpaths in your area, it's probably not any news to you. So like these are things that you can kind of factor in and say, okay, well, first of all, your steps are like if there's no footpaths in the area and maybe you use public transport a lot, your steps are probably already quite low. So you don't necessarily need to like be going up straight to 10,000. If you got up to like 6,000 steps per day, you'd be doing well, and 6,000 steps it can be quite easy to accumulate. If you're walking at a decent pace, 3,000 steps, you could do that in 20 minutes. Like you should be able to do it in 20 minutes, and you don't necessarily need to have a massive amount of kind of space to kind of get all of that stuff done. If you're really stuck for either time or again like availability of footpaths, for example, you can invest in a walking pad. Walking pads are very accessible these days. You pick one up for €300, and I think a lot of people when they like talk about like the cost of this thing here, right? Like €300, like, oh, that's a little bit much, isn't it, for something like to walk on? But like realistically, you're not going to drive to the gym to just walk on a treadmill. And realistically, it is something that is going back to what we said earlier. If it's linked to your motivation of wanting to get a shape, you won't mind, and it's something that you'll always have, and you'll always have in a rush. You'll have it when it's raining outside, and it's an investment that you'll just have all the time. Emma actually bought one for prep because Emma is really, really busy with work, and naturally enough, she's been prepping for shows. She has cardio to do. She has she had cardio to do pretty much every single day for a while, and she also had to get in like 15,000 steps alongside running a very successful online coaching business too, as well as like doing everything else that she does, right? So like for her, having that step tracker, that walking pad there, that made her able to actually kind of stick to her plan and meet her goals. Yeah, it's €300, but like it's like, again, if it kind of matters to you and you don't really have any other options, this is an option that can save you, you know. But again, that will need to be planned in. Like even still, walking pad, you can't just assume the walking pad's there, I'll get on it at some point. You know, I've done this myself, right? So when we got the bike and the cross trainer in Canada, you know, I was pretty consistent for a while with the likes of my cardio, and then I stopped planning it into my day. And then once I stopped planning it into my day, I stopped doing it. I'd be like, okay, I'll do the cardio today at some point, and some point never came. Some point never came. I didn't specify time I was going to do it, and that's a really, really important part of it, right? So one of the big reasons of planning ahead for your day, whether that comes to, you know, planning in things like steps, when you're going to do them, where you're going to do them, your cardio, when you're going to do it, where you're going to do it, how long you're going to do it for, factoring in time, cost of travel too. The reason all of these things is really, really important is because it sets the intention, right? It sets outright, I am going to do this part of my plan at this time in this place, right? And the time and the place part of it is quite important, and something I like when I see somebody, a client who is kind of struggling with these things, implementing things, I'll put this into their mind, right? Like it's important for you to actually kind of like to make that part of your strategy, because it sets the intention, and when you say that you're going to do something at a time and place, it increases the likelihood that you are going to do it, right? And then as well, from the nutritional point of view, right, you know, having your calories and macros set up is fantastic, but it's a small part of the puzzle, right? Because again, one thing I see all the time when I'm reviewing people's nutrition logs is that they will be constantly either falling short of a few targets, right? And I give people pretty like reasonable targets, you know, typically when it comes to your calorie intake, give you about 100 calories of a range. When it comes to protein intakes, I'm giving about protein carbs intakes, I'm giving about 20 grams of a range. With fats, about 10 grams of a range, right? That's plenty of flexibility. Like it doesn't sound like a huge amount, but actually is. At the moment, my flexibility is 10 grams protein carbs, 10 grams of protein carbs, and 5 grams of fat. So that's a lot stricter. But like, you know, giving a good bit of variance there, and even then on the carbs and fats, like once calories and protein are met, I'm like, like I'm not gonna fight you on this, because I can't give you a good enough reason as to why that really matters over the long term. Now, at the same time, I think it's good to come into each day and say, okay, I'm eating this many meals per day, this how often I'm eating per day. Okay, you're starting off the day with some structure. These are the times I'm roughly going to eat. It doesn't have to be I'm going to eat at 3:45. I usually tell people, give this a range, right? Like even myself, throughout the day, my meal times are going to roughly vary by about 30 minutes to an hour. You know, just depending on how my day runs. I'm still going to have the same amount of meals. I'm still going to eat them. But it just I need to have that kind of time, right? If I don't put that in, that's when things kind of go awry, right? And then as well, from there, you say, okay, well, I'm going to eat these times. What I'm going to eat? How am I going to make up my nutrition? Okay, how am I going to make up my protein intake? Okay, I've got X amount of protein to hit. How much should I have in this meal, this meal, this meal, this meal? How am I going to spread it out evenly across the day? Okay, have I got any vegetables in my meal? Have I got any fruits within my diet? How am I hitting my fiber intake? All these different things you start layering in, and now all of a sudden you have a plan, right? You've got a plan for when you're doing your cardio. You've obviously kind of factored your training into your day, your commute to the gym. You've factored in your work-related thing, career-related thing, family-related things, social-related things, whatever it may be. But having a plan in place is so important, and it's not just about like, you know, having your training plan, like that's obviously important, but it's like, how are you going to implement this stuff today, and when are you going to implement this stuff today? Okay, this is an essential for fat loss. This part here is essential for fat loss. Okay, so say for example, right, I've got cardio to do twice per week, and I do it on a rest day, and I know that the longer I leave cardio to do in the day, I am less likely to do it. Okay, the day will get away. The day will get away from me, or I will just make up reasons as to why I can't go, or I will waste time. I'll procrastinate doing it. Right? I do not like doing cardio. I have never liked doing cardio. Um, I find it boring. It's misery. It's just like 35 minutes of just like, hoping it's going to end. So what do? I wake up. So on my rest days, I wake up in the morning. I have my coffee. I write in my diary how I'm going to go about my day. Right, like 30 minute by 30 minute. And then as soon as I finish my coffee, I go to the gym and do my cardio. Okay, no thinking about it, nothing else, no interim. I just go to the gym and do the cardio. Okay, and then it's done. Then it's done for the day. I don't need to worry about it. The hardest part of the day is out. Right. And this is a strategy that I really leaned into when I did my contest prep, right? When I did my contest prep, what was a really important thing for me to be doing pretty much every day, especially as I get closer to shows, doing some posing. When people leave your posing till, they leave it to some point in the day, right? And some point never comes, right? So a lot of times people will, they'll have posing as an afterthought. They're like, oh, I'll do it after training. Then what happens after training? You're fucking wrecked, or you need to be somewhere, and then you don't end up doing your posing. Every single morning when it's on prep, woke up as soon as I didn't even have my coffee. I literally woke up out of bed, had a shower, didn't even drink any water. Just went into my office at the time, set a timer for 15 minutes, and just ran through rounds. Right, did 5 minutes of symmetry, 5 minutes of muscularity poses, and then 5 minutes of my routine, and that's what it is. Right, had an interval clock to kind of help me with that, help me with the timings, and then that was over. That part of the day was over. I didn't have to worry about it because I put 15 minutes of practice in every single day. Right, now this is called eating that frog, doing the hardest part of the day first. Right, if you're gonna eat a frog, you're not going to sit around, think about it, look at it, inspect it, kind of feel the texture. If you're going to eat frog, you're just going to eat the fucking thing, right? And that's the exact same what you have to do here. You have to do the hardest part of the hardest tasks of your day. You got to get them done early, but you also have to plan them in and have a strategy for getting them done. So that's essentially how I'm going about the cardio. And then cardio, it is kind of growing on me. I'm not going to lie. I've just been watching episodes of Mayor of Kingstown the last while, so that's actually make it a little bit easier. I was watching some muscle nerds lecture. Luke Lehman is going to be on the podcast in 2 weeks' time. I was watching some of those lectures when I was doing cardio, but honestly, it felt as if the cardio was coming slower because I don't know why. I think I need to be entertained more so than educated when I'm doing these type of things. So yeah, that's a big fat loss essentially, or planning ahead of the day or the week. Now, another kind of fat loss essential, and I guess I've kind of talked through what my plan has been, but some of these other ones are going to be things that are very much related to kind of what I'm doing and how my diet is running as smooth as it is, and how previous ones have run as smooth as it is. But managing the weekends is a big one, right? And it's an area that so many people fail at because they just don't have the structure of the work week to kind of set them to get them through. Now, for me, thankfully, I love the way I eat. I love my diet. I put a lot of effort into making my food taste nice. I don't put a lot of effort into it, but I've learned over the years how to create nice meals that I look forward to, meals that I enjoy. And as a result of this, when it comes to the weekend, I don't really feel like a break. I'm just like, I'm just gonna eat my usual meals again. Now, to be fair, there is some variation I will have here. So, say for example, you're gonna be blown away by this, but say for example, some days I'll have a Greek yogurt bowl in the evening time to finish off my meals, and then other days I'll have a Ninja Creamy. This is the extent of variation that you might get here. Some days I'll have a steak, sometimes I'll have chicken. Sometimes I'll try a different seasoning than another. Right? These are just the variations that kind of suit me. It may not suit everybody, but I do definitely think across the weekend, if you are kind of seeking some novelty or seeking some kind of change, you can still make it fit within your targets. So to be honest, a lot of the people I work with, when it comes to the weekend and they're kind of going through a fat loss phase, I will say to them, like aim to have like at least 50% of your weekend familiar and something that you usually do day to day. Maybe that's just the first meal that you have every morning, or maybe the first meal you have every morning, like in work, is something you're not like. It's just not something that really hits the spot taste wise. But maybe at the weekend you want to make yourself like a healthy fry or something like that. You know, a few bacon medallions, a few turkey pudding, or whatever it may be. But you know, again, you can make a fry that's like relatively decent for your macros. But again, have at least 50% of your weekend to be, you know, familiar, to be routine, and to still be structured, right? So that could be you eat the same amount of meals. That could be that you keep your meal timings relatively similar, because what a lot of people find is that they'll start to get hungry around the kind of times that they usually eat during the week. Um, and then as well, plan in some way for you to actually enjoy like something maybe slightly different. So this could be like, you know, you make something unique that you wouldn't have time to during the week because maybe you're working. So this could be like, you know, you decide, okay, we're gonna have like a barbecue night. We're gonna make some like, you know, calorie friendly burgers. So like, you know, you don't necessarily need to go and like check the packets of these, right? So when you're going to Tesco or something, look for, you know, your lower fat burgers, right? They exist and they taste just as nice, right? They don't feel like real greasy or anything like that. It's just kind of pure protein. You know, again, you know, you can get some type of like lower fat cheese, for example. You could get like a bacon medallion versus like, you know, having like the American crispy bacon on it, and you know, maybe you have just whatever type of sauce you have there, right? Very easy to track, very tasty. It's a unique type of thing to have as well, relative to what you might have during the week. You could plan to have like a pizza night, right? So you could get like your own kind of dough. You can buy like rolls of dough in supermarkets and make your own toppings, right? You can get like the Eat Lean cheese, which is like a high protein cheese, and you could use that as like as a main protein source. You get some passata, which is very low calorie too. So tomato passata is very low calorie. You wouldn't have to worry about the calories at all in that, to be honest. And then like, you know, you can top it with whatever you want, really. You know, maybe kind of stay away from having a mountain of pepperoni or like very high fat cuts of meat like chorizo and stuff like that. You can have some for sure. Like at the end of the day, if you're planning it in, you could still have these foods. But again, having something like that versus like getting like a Domino's meal deal, for example, or even a large Domino's pizza, is going to be much more, you know, economical when it does come to your calorie budget. But these are all ways that you can still like have fun or like, you know, eat nice things at the weekend without feeling like, you know, you're just like following this monotonous bland diet. Like these are things that myself and Emma do. Well, myself and Emma are in the middle of a diet, like, and like, you know, we'd love to go out for food, but we're like, you know what, we don't want to go out enough for food as frequently as we would when we're like in a more kind of like less restrictive phase. We're not dieting, because you know we just can't afford it from, you know, the perspective of our goals. But we can still kind of have our own fun, make her like, because ultimately we're like, if it's a date night you're after with like your missus, something like that, you want to be in their company. It's not necessarily about like, you know, the food. And that could even be the same if like, you know, maybe you have a couple of friends who are going through the same thing. Maybe they're all dieting together for a holiday or something like that, and you can all decide to meet up and have like some type of like fake away night, whatever it may be, right? You know, some people are probably rolling their eyes at these kind of things, but like ultimately at the end of the day, like, you know, I'm speaking from a place of experience here. Like these things work, and they can work, and you know, if you're open minded enough, you can start to see that these are very useful ways for you to be able to have great success when it does come to dieting. So yeah, know what you're doing across the weekend. Ensure that you have the weekend planned out. If you're going to be out and about, I still absolutely recommend, if you're out and about for the weekend, have some of your meals like, you know, like planned ahead of time. You know, you can at least have like 2 meals over your day kind of planned, and then have some maybe a calorie buffer saved up for like later on the evening time if you do end up going out to a restaurant or wherever you may go to. But again, in these contexts, it's just a case of saying, okay, well, I'm in a diet right now. I have to accept that there are going to be things that I can get and things that will probably not be the best option, because, you know, while you know you can eat what you want and lose body fat, when you go to a restaurant and you do that very frequently, you do that every single week, you'll find it very difficult, because restaurants don't care about your calorie intake. Restaurants don't care about your diet. They just want you to come back, you know. So when it does come to kind of eating out very frequently, you do have to, like, and especially if it is like a frequent thing, you just have to accept that, like, you're gonna have to go for some safe bets. You're gonna have to go for, the leaner steak. You're gonna have to go for like the roast chicken supreme or something like that, right? And you're gonna have to say, at times, okay, I'm gonna go for, the boiled potatoes, or I'm gonna go for like the steamed vegetables. But ultimately, at the end of the day, when you go out to eat and you're going out with like a group of people, the food some of the times is an important factor if you go to a really, really nice restaurant. And some of the times you're just going for like, a centerpiece. It's just like, you're just going to have a catch up, and the food is just like, secondary to the actual event, right? And this is again where it comes to like, understanding what you're going to be doing, what the nature of that event is, picking your spots on when to maybe going to be a little bit more kind of looser, and maybe accept that, like, okay, I'm gonna pick the looser option here. It is a pizza only place here. I'm gonna accept that maybe on the front end I'm not gonna be able to stick within my calories, and I can take that hit, and just next week I'll just like try to kind of stay in, or I'll try to ensure that I'm kind of managing my meals or managing my calorie intake better. If these things happen from time to time, they do, like even in my own context, right? So last weekend I was in Ireland for Emma's show. So Emma competed in the Muscle Contest Ireland, and so pretty much like we were back in Ireland, so I know supermarkets in Ireland. I was able to stick to my diet as usual across the weekend, and then on Saturday when she did her show, after it we went and got some food. Right, so Emma's coach Christian and her videographer Gaz, the four of us, we went to a place in Sandymount that did like burgers and like kind of just fried food essentially. So I decided probably wasn't the best to get like a big greasy fatty burger with loads of cheese and bacon on it. So I decided to get some chicken tenders and chips. That was all I got. Even though typically if I go to somewhere like that, I am getting large serving of fries. I'm getting chicken tenders and the burger, and I'm also getting some wings. That'd be like what my typical approach would be, But I decided I'd just get that. Now, that day was also meant to be a low day because I wasn't training on that day. Now, on that day, I actually did end up going over my calories very slightly. I went over my macros slightly too relative to what like my coach expects of me. But I was willing to accept that. Emma doesn't do like, it's not often that Emma wins an overall in the show. It was Emma's debut like show in that category, and the four of us were there. Was a special occasion. I got something that was reasonable enough that wasn't going to like blow my intake out of the water. And then after, when they got like some Krispy Kremes, I decided, you know what, I don't need Krispy Kremes. Like, I don't. First of all, I don't want one. It would be good for my goal, and I've had it. I've had enough now. I'm okay. So I think like in those contexts, and the reason, like, I came at that from a place of acceptance. I was completely fine that if the next day, if my weight went up or my weight was sticky for the next few days, that was okay with me. That occasion was worth more than than sticking to my calories exactly on that day. It's not that type of diet, and again, that's something that for you to consider too. I've already talked about when you do need to manage these things, and maybe when you do need to plan ahead, and maybe when you do need to make the more kind of boring decisions. But then there's also be times where you're gonna have to be like at a special occasion, and you're gonna have to say, okay, this event right now is more important than my fat loss goal, right? And I think one thing that people maybe stop them from kind of embarking on a fat loss goal is, having a lot going on. So, I started this fat loss phase again a month ago, and in the last month I've had that trip, and I've also had a wedding. One of my good friends, Rory, who's getting married at the start of the month in Marbella, and I have a wedding next month. In next week actually. And these are friends' weddings. These are things that I have been looking forward to for a long, long time. And these are things that I value very, very highly because, again, it's not often that my friends are getting married. And once all the marriages are done, all the marriages are done. And then there's no more celebrations really in the friends groups, other than maybe babies and christenings and 40th. Ugh. But for me, I'm very upfront with my coach, right, AJ, right? I've very much said to him, hey, these events, I can tell you right now, I can be as good as possible, right, with my diet leading up to them. However, for these things, I like I don't really care all that much about my fat loss goal during those events. Okay, all right. If they set me back a little bit, that's fine. I can just diet for a little bit longer. Okay. Now, again, one of the reasons I actually didn't decide to do bodybuilding prep this year is because those weddings were on, right? Because it just wouldn't have been great for me, the way I go about my process. I'd love to just have a kind of clear. You're never gonna have a clear run, but things like weddings, they can be a little bit more of a. They could be a lot harder to manage, especially when they're close friends, right? So, for example, at the wedding at the start of May, that was pretty much just 3 days of drinking and not a lot of eating. So, probably wasn't actually too bad from a body composition realistically, but in the context of a prep where you're trying to retain as much muscle as possible, yeah, probably not the best thing in the world. But for these things, right? And this is again coming back to accepting on the front end, and again, all of these are kind of fitting into fat loss essentials, right? Planning ahead, manage your weekends, but also fitting in social occasions and how to deal with them, right? It's really, really important that you know what you're saying yes to and what you're saying no to. Okay, so when it comes to social occasions and how my personal kind of philosophy on these things is, because it's evolved a lot over time. In the beginning of me dieting and at the very start when it's kind of getting into all this stuff, I was very much a yes man. I was the person in my friend group that if something was on, I was saying yes. I was there. I was doing it. Okay. Now that did not make, I was able to get in shape doing that, but it did not make it easy. Like there's definitely a lot more hunger, there's way more kind of energy lows, there was just longer time frames which I had to diet for. I'm sure if I did a DEXA at the start of the diets and DEXA at the end, probably lost a considerable amount of muscle mass, because you simply cannot be fucking binge drinking alcohol and not sleeping across the weekends and then coming into the gym and during the week and expecting to do that nearly every week and retain as much muscle and strength as possible, right? It can't happen, and especially can't happen as you get older. So, I've kind of went through that phase, whereas now social occasions for me, they're very much more. They have to be things that I'm saying fuck yes to, right? Like they're things that I have to be like, this is an occasion that is only going to happen once, right? So this is again, my friends' weddings. There could be things like I'm going to Oasis. Managed to get one. I managed to get a ticket for the one in August in Ireland. Don't ask me how much I paid for it. But these are things that are, and that's going to be towards the end of my diet too. And these are things that again, they're going to be once off things, right? If during those periods I am a little bit off plan, I don't mind, because again, they're things that I will ultimately value more than this diet phase. And even something, my coach was talking about me, about to me this week, right? He even said, when I checked in this week, and I kind of mentioned, yeah, I went out for something to eat, calories are probably a little bit over, it is what it is. And he's like, you know what, ultimately at the end of the day, you're not in a prep at the moment. You're doing essentially a very long mini cut. The level of importance of this right now is not as if you're competing on stage in a couple weeks time. It's important, and I say this all the time, it's important to know what occasions you want to be looser for and which ones that you can be more reserved for. There's going to be plenty of occasions which I'm happy to say no to. I love my friends and all, but I'm not going to their 32nd birthday. That requires me to fly back to Ireland as well. So sorry lads. But there's things like that, just occasions that I'm happy to say no to, because I ultimately know that while they be fun, they're not going to be something that we're going to look back on time and say that was a monumental time. And again, you're going to have the exact same for you, and you're going to have to, if you're going to be doing well in fat loss phase, you're gonna have to learn how to say no. You're gonna have to get comfortable with saying no. You're gonna have to get comfortable with missing out on things, right? There's been things I've missed out on over time, my friend group and stuff like that. like at the time they're maybe painful, maybe missed a few festivals and stuff like that, but maybe it's working towards something else I thought was really valuable to me. And you could be the exact same. Maybe this fat loss phase for you is really important. Maybe, this is like you've been trying your best like the last few years, and this time around you're like, this is gonna be different. I really need to make it work this time. But like you're gonna have temptations pop up. You're gonna have people going to festivals. You're gonna have holidays pop up. Random plans, random night outs like come up, and you're gonna have to decide whether that is something that is just like that's a fuck yes or that's a fuck no. Right? That's something that you know you will. That's something that you'll wake up the next day and say, oh, I wish I didn't do that. That wasn't worth it. Or it's gonna be something where you wake up the next day and you're talking about it for the next week, for the next month, and you're looking back at that like weekend over time, like in time. Just going there's like we all know those occasions, right? So you need to learn how to say no to those things, and you need to learn how to be okay with like that FOMO, that fear of missing out, because quite often that's why a lot of people fail. People don't know how to fit in these social occasions. People don't know how to learn to say no, learn to do these social occasions, and they end up like completely always kind of satisfying other people versus satisfying themselves, because they were too scared to kind of put their own needs and own wants and their own desires over, maybe just kind of fitting in with a group, or kind of like appeasing to other people. Okay, so yeah, this is a very, very big essential for fat loss. All right, so some other ones here. Realize actually this episode has gone on for longer than I thought it would. I've done it in one take, which is kind of a first. Usually when I do solo episodes, I literally have to like start, restart like a couple of times, because I keep tripping over my words. I'm like, I don't know, get a little bit like in my head. that can't happen. It's my own fucking podcast. I can do what I want. But anyway, so another big thing right here is to forget about the timeline, right? No matter how long you are going to be dieting for, you just need to stop thinking about how long it's going to take, okay? I'm going to be dieting, as I said, for 19 weeks in total. I am not thinking about August. I'm not thinking that far ahead into the future. And I think there's one thing that like really gets to people, right? So say, for example, you're on a day where your energy's been low, you're quite hungry, and you're just like, oh, this diet for fuck's sake. And then you start thinking about how much longer you have to go for. That is a recipe for taking your foot off the gas and letting things slip. That's a recipe for, we'll just have this like little taste of, my child's fucking lunch, or I'll lick the spoon off that cake that you're baking, whatever it may be. I'll just have this piece of dark chocolate. Doesn't matter. That serving of whatever was X amount of grams, I should be having this amount of grams. Doesn't matter. This is where a lot of these like complacency things pop into the fray, and then all of a sudden you get to the end of the week, it's like, I've been putting in all this effort, and I'm doing all this, I'm doing all these things, but you're actually discounting a lot of things that you're actually not doing, or you are doing, that are kind of removing your efforts, right? You're forgetting about the a couple thousand steps that you didn't do. You're forgetting about the food that you just didn't bother tracking. You're forgetting about the kind of exercises that you just kind of sandbag in the gym, whatever it may be, right? This is what happens when you think too far ahead in the future, and how much further you have to go. It causes you just be complacent as fuck. The way I get a lot of my clients to think about this process is I will let them know I'll give them an idea of what a timeline is for their goal, but quite often that timeline is very, very dependent on just like how their body is responding to the phase, and how their body's responding to the phase, how much effort they're giving, and just like to a degree, kind of luck. Like there's definitely an element of luck at play here too, right? Because for some people, for whatever reason, they don't seem like they're in a 1,000-calorie deficit, but they are, based off like what's happening on the scales. And for some people are in a 1,000-calorie deficit and nothing is happening, right? That's probably an extreme example, but some people could be seeming like they're doing a lot more than they actually are, and then all of a sudden like they're having a harder time like losing body fat. And sometimes this is like, maybe your metabolism is a bit more adaptive than another person, and as a result you have to kind of make more and more changes, or whatever it may be. But when you're thinking too far in the future, again, it causes this complacency. So what I get a lot of my clients to do is, again, just give them this kind of rough idea of timeline, how long this process is going to take. give them some kind of mathematical breakdown of what I expect their loss to be per week. And, we're trying to kind of aim towards that type of, that rate of fat loss over time. Okay. Now, alongside that, I'm really, really encouraging them to think about not that day in the future, but think about today, right? I talk about this all the time in the podcast, being process oriented. Think about what you need to do today. How can you make today the best possible for that goal, okay? Again, you don't see the consequences of you hitting your protein today. You don't see the consequences of you hitting your steps today. You don't see the consequences of you not hitting your steps today, or not hitting your protein, or not hitting your calories. But these all add up over time. And everything that you forget to do or do, they do add up, right? It's ultimately, it is going to be something that kind of accumulates over the long term. Now, as you kind of think about this, like kind of this approach of like thinking day to day, it does improve your ability to kind of be more accurate with what you're doing, right? You're going to think more about kind of planning ahead, as I mentioned already. You're going to think about what you're doing when you're doing it. You're going to be like, trying to hit your protein today. You're going to be trying to hit your calories today. You're going to be trying to hit your steps today. You're going to be trying to put as much effort as you can into your training session today. You're going to be doing everything for today, so that when you go to bed at night, you can rest easy. You put your head in the pillow and say, I gave today 100%, and if like it doesn't have to be 100%, it can be 90%, it could be 85%, 80%, right? You can go to bed and say, I gave today as good as effort as I potentially can, right? Versus again, at the end of the day, when you've been kind of thinking too far in the future and like, today wasn't great. I think I could do a little bit better tomorrow. Once you get to that point where like, I think I can do a little bit better tomorrow, again, it's like some point, it just doesn't come, right? Like these are things that you are just better off not kind of getting into the habit with, because complacency becomes a habit. Like you not doing your steps, you not tracking that extra bit of food, you taking off, like having that extra bit of oil when you're cooking, or extra bit of dark chocolate, wherever it may be, because you didn't break the thing evenly or whatever. These things become habits, and it only takes 2 days for the bad habit to really start forming, right? Like momentum is something you do not want going towards, like poor behaviors, because they are ultimately harder to stop, and harder to stop than it is to develop a good habit, right? Because quite often good habits just take a lot more kind of effort, focus, and diligent practice, deliberate practice. So ultimately, they are things that you just want to stop and put. So once you get to the point where you're like, oh, I've been a little bit complacent today, I think I can do better tomorrow, make that tomorrow your bitch. Like that tomorrow, that's the day where you pull up your bootstraps and you say, okay, how am I doing this? When am I doing it? And shit is getting done. All right. So that is really, really important. Okay. So again, think about today. How can I make today as good as possible and perfect or near perfect for my goal? Okay. And anytime you have a day where you're not, where it's like you've given a good effort, but as a result of even giving good effort, things have just not went to plan, then that's time for you to sit down with your diary that evening or in the morning and say, okay, what went wrong yesterday? Okay, this what went wrong. How can I fix it? Boom. The next day you have your plan. You have this amended plan. You've got an extra solution, or if you work with a coach, you can just say, okay, what type of solutions have I got on my plate here? You'll have your options, and then you can just go for it and do the damn thing. All right. So coming into some of my last few essentials here, right? So ensuring that your environment is in line with your goals, right? So this is just very, very simple one. So just ensuring that you have everything at your disposal to actually do all the tasks you need to do. So if you're in Ireland, you better own a fucking jacket, a good raincoat, so that you can go out and do your steps. It is going to rain. Like absolutely, I can guarantee it. Okay, I can't guarantee a lot in life, but I can guarantee that it is going to rain in Ireland at some point. So at some point, I said never comes, but in Ireland at some point for rain, it actually always comes. It comes probably more than we'd like it to. So when it does come to getting things with steps in, a rain jacket, like it's completely fine to go outside. It's completely fine to get wet. It's fine. Like you're not gonna die if you get a little bit wet. You're not a gremlin. Sorry, you're not a Furby that's gonna turn into a gremlin if you have a little bit of rain turn on you. If you are, you probably need to contact somebody for help and get that sorted out. But that's, again, just a very essential thing that you need to have in your environment, okay? And maybe some good waterproof Gore-Tex shoes. Then other things that you may look at to have in your environment, well, ensuring that you have adequate clothing for the gym. You have a working wash machine. All these things sound silly, but at the end of the day, it's like these can be the friction between you going to the gym and you not going to the gym. You having adequate gym wear, you having adequate equipment to kind of go to the gym, you having food in the fridge to make your meals, you having Tupperware in the press, or kind of glass Tupperware containers. You just need to ensure that whatever you need, all the gadgets and devices, whatever they may be, to do the bits and bobs that are going to be required to get in shape, you need them there. So that's, again, food in the fridge. You need to have a plan there for when you're going to go to the shop and get the stuff. To do your food shop, you're going to have to plan when you are going to kind of organize all your equipment for the gym. You're gonna have to organize when you're gonna be able to go for your walks again. Sorry, we're kind of going off track here a little bit. He's going back to the plan ahead. But it also kind of goes in line with ensure that you have your environment kind of set up so you don't kind of fall into maybe kind of more negative behaviors, right? So very simple things here, right? Most people probably could do it improving their sleep. Get the laptop out your fucking room. Get your TV, your PlayStation out your bedroom. You don't need it there, right? It's not doing you any favors. Most people who have TVs or PlayStations in their bedroom, or whatever it may be, they're probably the people that are staying up at 2, 3 a.m. and are wondering why they're waking up in the morning and feeling wrecked, and then they're struggling to stick to their diet the next day because you're not sleeping. You're getting shit sleep. You're getting very poor quality sleep. So get the TV out of the room, get the PlayStation out of the room, put it in a different room, okay? You can still play it, just you're not playing it in your bedroom, right? Because it does encourage you to stay up longer, right? Again, no laptops in the room either. I don't want you watching Netflix or something like that when you're lying in bed. Do something more relaxing, okay? This TV series I'm watching at the moment, so watching that in bed, I'd be watching the episodes all night long because it's entertaining. You always leave on cliffhangers, right? But that's one thing. That's one way to prep your environment that could improve a massive component of the fat loss process, which is improving your sleep quality. Because if you improve your sleep quality, you're going to even improve and quantity. You're going to improve the relative amount of fat mass you lose relative to lean mass, which obviously want to preserve as much lean mass as possible, and mainly get fat loss, right? So that's a very, very, very big one. The other thing is most people are going to have some foods which, if they're in the house, they are just going to eat the whole bag, the whole packet, whatever it may be. Keep them out of the house, okay? If you want the food, walk to the shop and get yourself a single serving of the pack of crisps, or whatever it may be, right? You're kind of knocking off 2 birds with 1 stone there. You're getting the thing you want, but you're also getting some steps in along the way. So, and then as well, maybe even that friction of having to go out and get it, that's enough for you to say, no, I'm not going to do it. It's not worth it, right? And boom, you have essentially stuck to your plan for the day, right? So while you don't necessarily need to restrict or cut out, while you actually kind of do need to restrict and reduce some of your favorite foods, you don't need to keep them out completely, but quite often it's people who are having these foods too much. If you go into your MyFitnessPal logs and you see that half of your calorie intake, which I have seen, of your nutrition for the day is snacks, biscuits, packs of crisps, chocolate bars, you are going to have a shitty time dieting and lose body fat. You can have your calorie target met, you can have your protein target met, but I can guarantee you're probably hungry a lot of the time, and you're probably having shit energy, shit digestion, and ultimately it's not really a great diet. Again, what this is just something that kind of riles me up. It's not the type of diet that you'd probably be kind of encouraging your child to eat, So we want to be trying to move towards a healthful diet here. You can still have some of those foods, but it's all about portion control, really. Come on. So that's a very big point there, right? So ensure that your environment is kind of in line with your nutritional goals, your nutritional needs, and as well trying to remove anything in the house which is potentially unhealthful habit, because a lot of times people aren't maybe kind of getting as much satisfaction from that half packet of Maryland or having 100 grams of a dairy milk bar, they're getting like some satisfaction from some of it, but then it gets towards like the end of it, and they're just kind of eating it for the sake of eating it. They're trying to essentially chase the kind of reward they got in those initial few bites. So you can decrease the portion size, and you won't really feel like you're missing out. But it could be the difference between you being able to stick to your diet and stick within the calorie intake, or you end up just like kind of splurging your calories out in the evening time every single night, and all of a sudden you're not able to lose body fat because you're not able to stick to your plan because you're having too many foods or too tasty, and they're just causing you to essentially not binge, but overeat on things that are easy to overeat. So there's some aspects of, I guess, environment prep, and then other things are just going to be learn how to cook basic meals. Okay, learn how to cook basic meals and learn how to prep efficiently. So again, it's a pretty big fat loss essential, I would say. I am very thankful that I was kind of thrust into the living situation I had when I was in my first year of college. So I was living with two of my friends, and none of us were chefs. But I guess like when you are kind of left to fend for yourself in that kind of regard, you do start to learn some basic, life skills. You learn how to cook. You learn how to boil a pot of rice or boil some pasta, or cook a chicken breast, all this kind of stuff. And as well, I guess you have to be a little bit creative too if you want to make it taste nice. You start experimenting with things, and you don't necessarily need to be a whiz in the kitchen. You don't need to be a chef, but you need to be able to learn how to use your cooker, like use the gas stove, use the conventional oven or the fan oven. There are a lot of appliances out there that now make it quite easy for you to make a very basic meal. Something like an air fryer, you can cook fucking anything in that. Something like a rice cooker, again, amazing for cooking rice, of course. Slow cookers exist, and there are, again, very easy recipes that you can get on something like ChatGPT. That will just be able to like give you some rundown as to how to kind of cook some basic meals, right? So like for me, I keep most of my meals as basic as I potentially can because it's just it's convenient, but at the same time it's convenient. I'm also trying to kind of balance the fact that I need to eat 250 grams of protein per day, X amount of calories, and I also want to kind of keep my fiber intake quite high, but I also don't want to spend hours upon hours in the kitchen. So for me, big things that are really important, right? When it comes to prepping potatoes, I microwave them, right? Just put a few holes in them, put a few holes in them with a fork, throw them into the microwave, put that on until they get soft, which doesn't take long. It's usually like less than 10 minutes for a portion size, and boom, there are my potatoes prepped in a pot. While they are cooking, I could steam some broccoli with a stock cube. Okay, that same 10 minutes, the broccoli and the potatoes are done. On the pan, season a bit of chicken, a bit of salt, pepper, whatever else I decide to throw on it, a bit of spray oil or a bit of olive oil if I have the fats, and boom, that's my meal done. And maybe have a side of barbecue sauce to that, and throw a bit of salt and pepper on the actual potatoes, or throw them in the air fryer then as well with a bit of spray oil, and that's a pretty decent simple meal that's ready in less than 15 minutes. Even things like oats, like oats. You don't need a recipe for oats, but like you put some liquid in, you put some oats in a bowl, and you put it in the microwave. Now, top tips: if you are like, oh well, oats are kind of bland, get some flavor drops from My Protein. Right, the vanilla ones are the ones I use for all my Greek yogurts, the one I use for all my oats, and it just makes them taste a lot nicer. You could also just kind of, and then alongside that, just need to top it off with some things. You could decide, okay, I'm going to make some whey paste. So you get 30 grams of whey, mix it with 30 grams or 40 grams of milk, or almond milk or coconut milk or water even. And you can make that into a paste, put that over your protein powder or put that over your oats, and there you go. You have essentially a high protein bowl of oats. You don't need to put the protein into the oats and mix it up, because sometimes that gets very clumpy and just outright not nice. And there you go. You have fiber, you have protein, you have a filling meal, and you can throw whatever toppings you want. You can throw in some frozen fruit, you can throw in some different fats, some nuts, maybe throw in some seeds, some dark chocolate. You got a fairly balanced meal there, prepped in less than 5 minutes. again, these are all just some very, very simple things that you can use, and learning how to prep efficiently. Like, so being able to use all the appliances that you do have. So, like I mentioned, a rice cooker. You can have your rice cooked for 3 days, depending how much you eat. 3 or more days, even depending how much days you eat. Don't quote me now for fucking food safety things here, right? Because I think my digestive system is just it's been built to withstand anything. But you could have rice prepared for a few days in a rice cooker. That literally is like prepped so easily. You put the rice into the rice cooker, put the water into the rice cooker, press on, and all of a sudden in like 20 minutes you have perfect rice for a number of days, right? No time investment really into that. You could be doing other things. You could put that on when you're off to work, come home, and all the rice for the next few days is ready. The exact same with prepping a batch load of chicken breasts or turkey burgers or mince, whatever it may be. You will be able to kind of prep all these things very, very quickly and very efficiently, all right? Because ultimately, this doesn't matter when it does come to fat loss, right? Because again, most things that are kind of impeding people from kind of losing body fat is being planned, and friction to actually kind of make meals that are going to suit them, that are going to fit their goals, right? One thing that I recommend a lot of my clients do when it does come to improving their fruit and vegetable intake, particularly vegetables, is when they come in for the supermarket, before, like as you're kind of putting everything away, take all the vegetables out of the packets and dice them up, put them in Tupperware containers, put them in the fridge. And then when you're making any meal, it'd be easy for you to just kind of reach in, take your vegetable and kind of put it into the meal, right? This reduces friction massively and it improves your adherence to actually having fruits and vegetables in meals, because you are actually kind of putting the effort into kind of reducing the friction. It does take a little bit longer to do it, but it's a lot easier to do it once and do it for everything than to do it multiple times throughout the day. And again, if it allows you to get them in easier and it encourages you to have them more often, then it's a net win, So this is another thing that you can learn how to do efficiently, right? Other things that can suffice if you have the money is going to be, buying the actual kind of bags of already pre-cut veg, or buying already pre-cut chicken, pre-cut beef. Mince is a good one because it preps very, very quickly. You cook a whole tray in like less than about 5 minutes, really. So these are all other really kind of quick and easy things that you can learn at the prep. Right now, I have a whole podcast and how to do all this type of stuff. So you scroll back. I can't remember the name of the episode. I will link it in the description. But I went through everything here to kind of learn how to like meal prep. So I'm not going to go through it, but it is an absolute essential, and it's something. A lot of these, to be honest, are things that I've harped on many, many times in all the podcasts because they bear repeating because people still don't do them. All right, so they're pretty much some fat loss essentials there. I don't know how many went through there, but there's a few. But these are some things that, like, you coming onto your fat loss journey, these are some things for you to think about versus just the calories and macros, and what type of diet foods you should be having, or should I have a refeed or not. To be honest, most of the times you don't need a refeed. And a lot of those questions are further on down the line. This is the stuff for you to nail first. This is stuff to get important. This is the stuff to get consistent with. If you do this, you will have success in fat loss, okay? I've been doing it for a long time. Again, I've coached hundreds of people to do so. If you are struggling to do it on your own and you prefer some guidance, I do have coaching spaces available. So drop me a DM on Instagram or click the link in the description for coaching spaces, and I'll be back to you. But without further ado, we're going to wrap up this episode, okay? So that's pretty much that. Okay, chatted for long enough here, but hopefully you are going to get something out of this one. As always, it's a pleasure to be in your ear holes this week. Hope you heard that correctly. And we will catch you next week. All right. If you like the podcast, make sure you give me a rating and review on the podcast. Rating and review on the podcast platform you're listening on. Other than that, we'll catch you next week.